look, that narrative that Russia felt, or Putin felt obliged to invade because NATO was expanding eastwards, he says, no, it's the other way around, because people, especially in the East, expected Putin to at some point invade countries. They wanted to be part of NATO to avoid that fate, and see what happens. He invades Georgia, he invades Ukraine. So it made sense to expand NATO to counter that.
I don't think
Putin
generals
only wants to restore the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union borderlines.
I don't think generals know much about anything other than how to fight. But that is absolutely not the history at all. It's not the history at all. Putin was completely cooperative with Europe. But then the United States abandoned the anti-ballistic missile treaty. Then the United States, by the way, bombed Russia's ally for 78 straight days, Serbia, to break Serbia apart. Then the United States invaded Iraq. Then the United States called for NATO expansion to Ukraine and to Georgia. Then the United States sent the CIA in to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Then the United States sent NATO in to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. Then the United States placed Aegis missiles in Romania and Poland. Then the United States overthrew the government of Ukraine. Obviously, a U.S. concocted coup. If anyone understands it, I happen to see some of it close up. It was a U.S. operation. So the U.S. overthrows the Ukrainian government. The U.S. arms Ukraine. Then there is the Minsk agreements, and the United States, and now we heard from Merkel, Germany, France, the guarantors of Minsk, blow it off because Ukraine doesn't like it.
Yeah, and then March 22, of course, the peace treatment.
Yes, and it's all about Russia. Give me a break. This is maybe your general doesn't understand politics. I have no idea, but he doesn't understand this history at all, or he's not telling the truth.
And what about the next step? So let's say the support for Ukraine goes down. Fewer weapons are being delivered. We already see, of course, that Ukraine suffers on the front lines. It's Russia has much more firepower than Ukraine. I heard Medvedev saying that Russia may well go to Odessa, even Kiev. How far you think will Russia go in terms of conquering Ukraine?
It depends on what Europe and the United States actually do. If Europe and the United States, and especially the U.S., if we have a president that can do it, I'm not sure. This is one of our tragedies, but actually says with Putin, let's sit down and talk. Let's figure out how to make peace. Then the outcome will be vastly better. If instead the U.S. And Europe keep escalating, and Europe sends its troops in and all this rest of this stuff, then God help us. We don't know where it's going to end. But
yeah. So ceasefire is the important thing to start with. First, ceasefire.
Not the ceasefire. The important thing to start with is the idea that you need a negotiated peace. And by the way, European leaders are full of BS when they say, well, yes, it will be negotiated, but we need to fight now. What is fighting now? Why isn't there any serious attempt to discuss what this outcome could be? One reason is that not one leader dares to say, other than Orban and Fico, dares to say the truth, that Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO, and it's a bad idea, and we should say so in return for a sensible peace. That's been the missing idea all along. And I know that. I begged the White House in end of 2021, talk to Putin. Don't have this war. He's already proposed. Putin said, have peace with neutrality. And then the White House senior official said to me, no. NATO must have an open door. Why? Why? Does the U.S. accept an open door for Mexico and China, or Mexico and Russia, or Cuba and Russia?
No.
Well, no, we almost had a nuclear war over that one.
And it goes against the Monroe Doctrine, right? That
not only do we have a Monroe Doctrine over 201 years now, saying don't interfere in all of the Americas, but this is reiterated by American leaders in the UN General Assembly. I sit there and I listen to their speeches every September. And so the Monroe Doctrine is not a historical doctrine. Trump said it applies today. Well, can one European leader be honest about this and say, why don't we try to understand something from the other side, that Russia really doesn't want NATO on its 2,100-kilometer border, especially because the United States is addicted to regime change? It makes perfect sense to me.
So it'll be the first step is to be honest and accept the fact that Ukraine should not join NATO ever. What would be the subsequent steps then to, in the end, achieve a durable peace?
Well, just to say, if we had said that in December 2021, there would have been no war. That was essentially what Putin and Lavrov were saying. Neutrality, we avoid any kind of conflict. In March 2022, that's what was initialed between Russia and Ukraine. A deal, you look at the terms published recently by the Wall Street Journal and others of what was on the table. And I've talked to all the negotiators involved in this, not on the Ukrainian side. They don't talk to me, but the mediators, the Russians, the observers from the outside who were involved. Yeah, there was a deal. And the deal at that time was not even absorbing Donetsk and Lugansk at the time. It was neutrality. And, by the way, Crimea belongs to Russia. That was the terms of the deal. An excellent deal, because Crimea is not going back to Ukraine, and anyone that knows the history of it and knows the insanity of what's going on every day with Budanov and Zelensky saying, we're going to take Ukraine and we're going to corner Russia in the Black Sea, sounding like Lord Palmerston of 1856. Obviously, Russia's not going to retreat from that short of nuclear war. So what do we want? Well, there are people in the United States that just want ongoing war. Absolutely. They want it. They don't mind. 500,000 dead and wounded Ukrainians by now. Okay, it's not us. It's just our arms.
It's good for the industry, right?
It's a pittance. So this is part of what's going on. But for Europe, this is miserable, and it's escalating. And I'm waiting for just some honest voices. I know a couple of them, and I think Orban has been the most accurate European leader, direct, honest, and correct about all of this. And now you have Robert Fico next door in Slovakia, but you have crazy hotheads or U.S. vassals that are going to get everyone killed if they actually carry out what they're saying. And so, to come back to your point, the first step is to say, we need to end this war. We need to end the war, not on the battlefield. We need to end it through negotiations. Second, we have to be honest with ourselves and with Russia. What is this about? Well, we can just quote Stoltenberg. It's about NATO enlargement. Okay? It was a terrible idea. Some of our stupidest right-wing leaders in America were the authors of this. So Europe should understand that. You really want to go down because of Victoria Nuland? Honest to God? That's the second step. Some honesty. Third, okay, Russia, we don't want you stepping over anybody else's borders. We want demilitarization and protection. We're not after you or regime change, and you're not after us, and we got to stop the games. Now, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? That's actually a matter for the US and Russia to discuss. Here's a serious problem. I don't know whether Biden is physically able to do this. I don't mean ideologically. I don't know whether he's of a state of mind capable of doing this. We don't really know the situation in the United States right now with our own leadership. We need.
And do you believe Trump will take that decision?
I think Trump would probably take that decision, though I don't look at Trump, with much sense of stability. But I don't think Trump would continue the war this way. So I do think on this particular issue, he would basically go that direction. But what I would really have preferred, and what I argued with all my European friends, counterparts in the leadership, why didn't a few European leaders get together and explain to the United States, we don't want to go down over NATO enlargement to Ukraine. This was not a good idea. We tried, we bluffed. You overthrew a government, we armed. Even they tried on the battlefield. This is a failing proposition. We got to do something different. And what we don't have is that group of European leaders that thinks clearly, speaks honestly, knows the history, and can bring this to a resolution. Because if the United States can't, Europe could.
Yeah, it's almost like they suffer from Stockholm syndrome, right, in Europe, because also Nord Stream is probably was blown up by the US, or
of course it was,
with the aid of US, but it's also just being swept under the carpet and we don't talk about it. But and we condone everything coming from the US, so it's crazy how
Europe's
the leaders behave.
Europe is the big loser in this. It's interesting, by the way, the European public isn't fooled. It's just like the American public. They're against all of this, but foreign policy is not run in a democratic way where people actually listen to the public. And if you look at the approval ratings of European leaders, my God, there's not one European leader that is popular. Not one. So the public is very unhappy, and understandably so. But it just is really weird that we have such a dearth of honesty right now in Europe when it's most needed. I'm hoping we won't have van der Leyen any more after her term ends, and that someone else will replace her. The idea that she could be reappointed after having done more damage to Europe than just about anybody is a measure of how odd things are.
And we'll probably get Mark Rutte, our current prime minister, as the new head of NATO. But looking at your face, it doesn't make you particularly happy.
I would love a European to represent Europe.
Yeah,
I actually like Europe. I like Europe a lot more than I like.
Me too, and it also pains me to see the decay of Europe and the bad prospects. We're running out of time because I know you're on a tight schedule. I also wanted to discuss Gaza, but that's such a big topic also. Maybe you have some final remarks on that conflict also, on how to end it.
Look, the Gaza situation is that Israel is the most right-wing extremist government in the world. It is committing a genocide in Gaza before our eyes. I think the International Court of Justice will find that way when it makes its final decision. I don't think it takes a genius to understand what's going on. Israel has displaced 2 million people. It is starving to death hundreds of thousands of people. It has demolished mosques, hospitals, schools, universities, apartment complexes in Gaza. It's mass murder before our eyes. And one can understand it because this government in Israel is so extreme that we've never seen anything like it. And as an American Jew, I can tell you, looking at what is said, this is a kind of zealotry that is absolutely a profound, vulgar distortion of ethical values, because it's motivated by an incredible hatred of the Palestinian people, but more than that, by some feeling of the religious right to rule over the Palestinian people and take all the land. And that's what this is about. And again, it's denied in Europe because you're not allowed to say these things. But it's not a matter of anti-Semitism or not anti-Semitism. We have mass murder taking place before our eyes. And that absolutely should not happen. Period. It's not complicated. So what should have been done? The United States arms Israel every day. The US could have stopped it any day. And what's amazing is Biden seems helpless. He says, oh, yes, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that. But I set no red lines. Why? Does Netanyahu run the US government? Does the Israeli lobby run the US government? Pathetic. This is what leadership is supposed to be. But again, Biden is very weak, maybe disabled. I don't know. We don't really know, but I'm pretty worried about the real state of affairs, both politically and with the vacuum of leadership in the United States. Now, what should happen? My own recommendation is the UN Security Council should vote immediately that Palestine is the 194th UN member state on the internationally recognized boundaries. That's the 4th of June, 1967 boundaries, with the capital of the state of Palestine in East Jerusalem. That's the international law. Vote it. Okay, the US will veto it, stand all alone. It goes to the General Assembly, overwhelming weight of world opinion that that's the solution. Even the US mumbles that that's the solution, even though Biden is too weak, either politically or mentally or something, to enforce it. Bring it back to the Security Council, vote again until the US stops blocking peace. Because this is not going to be stopped by Israel saying, oh, sorry, we did this. This is by design what they're doing. This is a government that wants to own and occupy the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. They're explicit about it. Again, it's not subtle. And so it's not going to be stopped by Israel. It's not going to be ended by negotiations between Israel and Palestine. It's going to be stopped by the UN Security Council. And it's going to be stopped when the United States stops being complicit in the killing.
Yeah, so the world needs to intervene, and hopefully all the build-up hatred will eventually go away, but it will take generations, both in Ukraine and in Israel and Gaza.
But the faster it stops, the faster the healing begins. Yeah. Yeah. And this is it. You cannot run a world on hate in the nuclear age without risking destroying humanity. And we actually go day to day now with talk of nuclear war.
And we were very close in 2022. I heard, I read the other day, New York Times, we were on the brink of a nuclear war, or at least the start of it in 2022.
I completely resent all of these political leaders for putting our lives at stake rather than sitting down and negotiating, which is their damn job, because they are to represent our interests, not their games.